Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good night. My name is Baltika Kavieses, and I will be hosting this webinar around the webinar series Health of Migrants and Refugees, Catalyzing Research Evidence Exchange between Chile and New Zealand. I'm a full professor at Universidad del Desarrollo in Chile, and it's my great pleasure to start with the first webinar of this webinar series in 2026. This webinar convenes researchers, practitioners, policymakers, and community leaders across the Pacific to advance comparative and methodologically rigorous insights on migrant and refugee health. At a time of accelerating human mobility, climate variability, and persistent inequities, Chile and Aotearoa, New Zealand provide two fertile contexts for cross-learning, each pursuing universalism while grappling with territorial disparities, service fragmentation, and imperative and culturally safe migrant-inclusive care. This first six-part series creates a binational learning platform to share findings, refine methods, and co-design solutions that are locally grounded and globally relevant. The organizers of this webinar series are the Center of Global Intercultural Health at Universidad del Desarrollo in Chile, which is also a WHO Bajo collaborating center for capacity building in the health of migrants and refugees, and the Center for Migrant and Refugee Health Research, Auckland University of Technology, New Zealand, advancing interdisciplinary migrant health research with policy impact. Supporting partners are the Lancet Migration Latin American Hub, Chilean Network of Research on Health and Migration RATISAM, and the New Zealand Policy Research Institute. Chile and New Zealand share roughly similar health systems infrastructures and also population demographics and population health outcomes. They also share priorities and distinctive challenges, as both countries are pursuing universal coverage under fiscal constraint and demographic change, while managing NCD's burdens and post-pandemic backlogs. The Chilean agenda focuses on reducing segmentation and financial barriers across its healthcare pathways, and New Zealand's reforms seek nationally consistent access, strengthening primary care, and equity anchored in Pae-Ora. These realities intersect with migration, climate-related mobility, and cultural and linguistics access, making Chile and New Zealand ideal comparators for evidence exchange and policy translation. I want to welcome you all again to this webinar number 4, which is titled Sense of Self and Coping Strategies Towards Loneliness Among Migrant Populations in New Zealand and Chile, Evidence-Based Lessons and Challenges. To start this webinar, I will introduce you to Professor Alejandra Carreño. She will be sharing her slides with us on her presentation first. Dear Alejandra, thank you for being with us today. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be sharing this webinar with you. Alejandra is a social anthropologist from Universidad de Chile in Chile, master in ethnopsychiatry from the University of Genova, and doctor PhD in cultural anthropology by the University of Siena. She has developed research around the anthropology of health and migration, focusing on themes like mental health, sexual and reproductive health, gender studies, maternities, childhood and adolescence. She is a researcher at the Center of Global Intercultural Health at UDD. Dear Alejandra, thank you for being with us again, and the screen is all yours.
Thank you, Baltika, and thank you to all of you. Good evening in Chile and good day, good morning in New Zealand. I'm very happy to be here and to share with you some reflections about this interesting topic. As Baltica said, I'm a medical anthropologist and working among other areas about mental health of migrant people. So this is a very good opportunity to share with you some reflections about how the people cope with loneliness and other difficulties that are connected with the migratory experience. So I will start just to give some framework to the non-Chilean people or non-Latin American people, highlighting that Latin America and the Caribbean, our continent had increased the intermigration, south-south migration. Our countries have simultaneously transformed into countries of origin, transit, and destination of migration, and it happens very regularly. During the COVID-19 crisis, we have seen the increasement of restrictive measures at various borders, and it increasing migratory irregularity in Latin American flows. And this is a characteristic that happened in the last years. At the same time, we have seen how the increase of xenophobia, stigmatization, and criminalization of migration through the continent. We have to remember that Latin America was a continent of origin, especially of migration from Latin America to United States and Europe, especially, but now the situation is rapidly changing. Um, in Chile, we can observe that the irregular condition of the migrant people has increased very rapidly in the last years, especially for different events that happened in the last years. Just to explain, from the 2012 to 2018, we have observed the increased restriction for specific nationalities. At the first time, it was Dominican Republic, Haiti, Cuba. After that, Venezuelan crisis had a factor of attention about that. Chile offers democratic responsibility visas to Venezuelan people, but a lot of them, 19,000, doesn't receive any answer about this visa. And of course, a lot of these people choose to do the migration even without this answer. COVID supposed another crisis. Of course, all the borders were closed, and at the same time, uh, our country refused a lot of refugee applications. Just 306% of refugee applications were approved in the last 10 years. So these are different layers that can explain why today we have a irregular condition and a lot of people in irregular conditions here in Chile, most of them from Latin American countries. When we start to work with this topic, we need to approach an intersectional to take in count an intersectionality approach, because Latin American feminist theory has introduced the gender approach very early in the reflections about migration, especially because, of course, a woman has an intensification the presence of women in migratory flow. They, of course, these migrations present a precarization of female labor and add the gender's perspective with interact with other variables as gender, age, and ethnicity. We have observed how women has become heads of migratory networks, especially in Latin America. They globalize their own communities and reinvent transnational caregiving and parenting strategies. And they were doing so well during the last decades in Latin America. Another perspective that is important to consider when we think about how the people cope with this kind of experience is the concept of double absence of Abdelmayer Sayad, as an Algerian sociologist, who very early in migratory studies observed that migration cannot be considering without this dual dimension or origin, journey, and destination. He talked about the double absence in the sense that the people, the migrants, lacks in the society of origin. He or she is missing the network of family, but he says he or he is also in absence in the host society, and this is very actually is very powerful in the current debates in Chile, because the presence of migrants in the public debates is only visible when they are considered a problem, and their presence is reduced to an economic language of cost and benefits. Considering this theoretical framework, I want to present some results from a research that we did during COVID and after that, working with women who have passed through an authorized border crossing, especially from Venezuela, but also from other Latin American countries, who were coming to Chile, crossing in irregularity condition, trying to cope between loneliness and solidarity. This is the book cover of a little book of divulgation that we did with this research. And just a methodological approach, we start working during COVID, so doing interviews by video interviews. But when we start to have the possibility to meet the people in presence, we add some methods that tries to incorporate involve also other techniques, art-based techniques, as body mapping. Well, body mapping is a technique that let us talk about the migratory narratives about experience to be placed in a collective framework in which the group of people who have shared an experience as coming through the desert to Chile could share the hardship they have endured, but also the other experience related to the journey. In which elements that are rarely seen in individual intervention will emerge. So, such as the collective care of networks, the memories of migration inscribed in the body, and how the people observe the networks of care that organize their migration. The results of this research talk about the sense of loneliness and talk about abandonment. It's important that the first result talk about how the people feels in the face to the states, the different states that abandon them in origin because of the political crisis that they are passing through, but also during the journey and in the host society because of their irregular condition, but also because of the arbitrariness in border migratory regimes. They have to face different forms of abandon that comes from the state itself. Women used to escape of situations of violence, experiences of violence in transit countries, experiences of violence from state agents. In fact, we have here a quote that talk about that. After that, in second place, we highlight that the sense of loneliness, the sense of self is very we talk about ungendered emotions, because the gender is a dimension that intersect this or construct the sense of loneliness and guilt, because women are considered primarily responsible for caring children, elderly, and parents, and they used to do their journey taking care of and caring literally other bodies, other people. So women report a lot of feelings of guilt and some responsibility for the sustaining the lives of others. The sense that I'm responsible of the life of other, and the sense of guilt because I'm exposing them to some dangers and risks. The systems of humanitarian systems tends also to exacerbate the maternal role, primarily taking women with children and restricting women's role to motherhood. So, of course, these situations can subject people to conditions of isolation and loneliness. And this is a very powerful quote that talk about this sense of guilty and how to be a woman exacerbate also this sense of loneliness and guilt. Notwithstanding, another dimension of this sense of self and how the people cope with loneliness has a dimension that migration is not only something that the people suffer, but also is narrated or related as a feat, an achievement. And this is very, very interesting because when the women talk about their histories, when the woman who migrates alone, sometimes they are fleeing from violent relationships or without the consent of the partners, the family, the parents. So they claim migration as an achievement. It's in part of their story that demonstrates their strength, their resilience, and the ability to rebuild themselves. Look who I am. Uh, Look what I can do. These are phrases that they do when they talk about how they feel with their story. So they are trying to also create a future for themselves and for their children. And in this way, they acquire different capitals that put into play, such as economic and autonomy. They learn more digital competence, or they did new job skills, acquire new job skills, etc. And of course, these are protective factors in the sense of mental health. And at the end, at the last, migration as solidarity. It's very important to understand that even if loneliness has a very important role during this kind of migration, also solidarity is a dimension that support the collective organization that support this kind of subversive migrations. Because without the presence of a state, in absence of the state protection, the collective networks are funded primarily. And for this reason, migration brings into play collective care networks involving not only women, but people of all genders and age. And for us, it has been very interesting to see how, for example, adolescents, children participate also of these networks of cares that create and support this kind of migrations. To finish, I have some reflections about that. And in the first times, of course, migration through unauthorized cross-border is part of a global mobility regimes when the people are constrained to immobility, they react with subversive mobility or this kind of mobilities that just respond to the necessity to mobility as a part of our global characteristics, especially in political crisis situations. The abdication of responsibility by states at the origin, transit, and the host societies creates structural factors that lead to the abandonment of migrants who are left to fend for themselves. The emotions connected with abandonment, guilt, and loneliness are sensations that are very present in the stories of this woman that are connected with gender mandates and, of course, intersect with migrant condition. But also it's true that the loneliness of migration, it's also claimed by migrant women as a part of a personal achievement. How far I have come. And this is something that I want to highlight. So migration, even when it's taken alone, it's a collective project sustained by networks of solidarity. And it's interesting to see how the people balance loneliness with solidarity. And there is always another person in relation to whom the movement takes place. So these are some reflections to finish this presentation, and we can share together some reflection and discussion at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Alejandra, for this fascinating presentation that raised so many important points in this topic. For example, the element of migration through unauthorized paths and how that raises concerns on the liminality of borders in any country in the world, and also the lack of security, safety, cultural awareness, and protection as people migrate through borders all over our world and region. Also, the element of gender and women's uh, tasks that are overcome and continue to be developed in such creative, amazing, powerful ways while they are migrating or facing vulnerabilities of many kinds, that women continue to support their children and their loved ones. That's incredible force that is transforming the world and sustaining love and care globally as well. I would also like to highlight the element of what the social epidemiologist Nancy Krieger calls the social embodiment, in this case of migration, and how the body hurts. And it's connected to the process in unique ways. And you showed some beautiful pictures of that work on connecting the body with the migration process. And finally, how you connect this with what regional epidemiologists such as Jaime Briel and others call the need for a focus on structural determinants, which are upper river stream, creating many of the problems and gaps we experience downstream in our everyday lives, particularly here for migrants and displaced individuals and communities. So the element of loneliness within that complex context becomes often underseen, yet so important to tackle and to address through research and through policy. So thank you so very much for that really interesting, really powerful presentation. I will give now the floor to Professor Ivy Jan Zhao. She's an assistant professor, deputy director of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Community Health Services at the School of Nursing at the University, the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Dear Ivy, it's such a lovely pleasure to have you with us today. Please, we look forward to hear your presentation and your insights around migration and loneliness in the territory that you have been working on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Batisher. I will just share my slides. So, can you see my slides? It should be
Yes,
okay now, right?
perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. And also, good morning, good afternoon, or maybe good evening, everyone. So my topic is about feeling a deep sense of loneliness among Chinese late life immigrants in New Zealand. Yeah, so I studied my PhD in the Auckland University of Technology. So my topic is mainly to focus on the late life Chinese late life immigrants. Just to give you some background about this population. So we define the late life immigrants. That means old adults, they immigrate in their later phase of life. So we can see from the census data of New Zealand from 2013 to 2018, this group of people have been significantly increased. It's mainly due to the we call it immigrant scheme of parent category family reunion. So in New Zealand, between 1987 to 2017, there are a large number of older dependent parents that immigrate to New Zealand to join their adult children. So under this scheme, and this scheme was temporarily suspended in 2017. That's because of an overflow quota. So they need some time to clean all the application. So I just found from this website, they reopened this visa scheme in 2022 with an like an annual quota of like 2,500. So this allowing for not just a parent, but also grandparent or any legal guardian of a New Zealand citizen or resident to live in New Zealand. So which is really good. So for this population, they immigrate during their later phase of life. This is experience is give them a significant life course transition that can be particularly difficult. So Chinese adults, they immigrant in the later phase of life, they're reported as experiencing difficulty with like English as their second language. And also they have like emotional effects of changes in filial relationships and also cultural shock and also the social isolation. And also from New Zealand government, we can see it's published by the Office of Seniors. So they have the better later life strategy to prioritize addressing loneliness as a key action by promoting the opportunity for this population to enhance their social engagement and active participation in community activities. I just show you two pictures. So one is it's a like a very old earliest generation of late life immigrants in 1939. This is just a photo from New Zealand Herald. And so another picture, this one is this lady is very popular with from a very popular video when I studied in New Zealand in 2017 to 2018. So that time, this video was took by a middle school student. She just wanted to show her grandmother's like immigration life in New Zealand, in Auckland. She wants to show her like kind of like a social activity and also experience of loneliness and try to attract her attention from the society and hope like to receive more respect and also patience from the society. So which is very interesting for me. Yeah, to define the loneliness, it's very commonly categorized into two types. So one is we call it emotional loneliness. So it's mainly captured as a subjective emotion or feelings arising from an unsatisfied social relations. People can feel lonely even within a crowd population, even living with their family member, they can still feel lonely. But according to my PhD study, so this is a study from one of my PhD study and also from one study from my supervisor, we identified the feeling of loneliness among Chinese late life immigrants. It's very complicated. It can be like combined with different feelings, like a feel kind of unsettled. There was also a sense of alienation, the feeling being excluded, and also helplessness, and also being abandoned. So I just cited some quotes from our previous study, like the older Chinese people, they believe that loneliness comes from an kind of uncertainty about their future. They think it's very important to establish an effective social support system with others. So while they are still able to do that, to contribute. And also from my study, the participant, I remember it's an older lady. She mentioned her son has moved back to China for a job opportunity. So she have to stay in Auckland by herself. She said, I can manage on my New Zealand superannuation rather than expecting financial support from my children. So from here, it's if we try to understand from our culture, actually older people they really expect financial support from adult children when they're old. So this kind of we can say it's a culture of filial piety. So then her loneliness is come from like a kind of unsatisfied with this kind of support. Yeah, so which is a little bit sad. And another type of the social loneliness, so we call it social loneliness. This mainly is about disrupted social relations after late life immigration. So they experience dramatic changes in their lifestyle and also challenges to their existing values and the cultural beliefs, as I have mentioned. Also, they mention about the disruption to their daily activity, also include the physical activity and the social networks in their host countries. So this is also an example from my PhD study. One paper is a qualitative data. So it's also mentioned how they feel like social isolated. This is I can say from an older man. It's already 8 years old, but I still remember the day I interviewed him at his home. He has mentioned my wife and I had sacrificed 7 years of our lives to look after three grandchildren. So I had no opportunity to visit China. I did not have much time to go out to participate in community activities in Auckland. So my life could be described by Chinese idiom as 画地为牢. So this term means they feel like be in a prison. So this, which is very sad that they are very busy. They are too burdened with domestic housework to participate in any social activity. So, and here is a new type of loneliness we just generate from our study. So for this population, the Chinese late life immigrants, we found that their loneliness is more complicated. It's integrated with many factors of culture. So we try to understand their loneliness with our traditional culture. It's a Confucian philosophy. In that philosophy, there's some key things to help us to understand their loneliness is like they have the duty of caring for the grandchildren. Also like faith. The faith is very important for like in the Chinese culture, even in the Asian culture. So they want a safe face. They will not disclose their negative feeling or any conflicts happen between themselves and their adult children. So which made them feel no one to share and feel lonely. So another is a filial piety. It's a very important expectation. And so we'll introduce it specifically like saving face I have mentioned. They don't want to disclose their feeling of loneliness. So there's a kind of struggling inside. And another thing, the filial piety expectation, which is very important for older Chinese people, is they expect the adult children and can provide like financial support, physical support, and as well as emotional support. While they old, they are become more dependent. Um, so at the same time, like we mentioned about intergenerational reciprocity, when they are still independent, they are more likely to provide care for grandchildren. So as a kind of exchange so they hope that when they are like more dependent, so the adult children can give back, so can look after them as well. So, but however, after they moved to the New Zealand, this culture became a little bit changed because the adult children, they are more tend to Western culture. So they found that there is a kind of imbalanced reciprocity, so which caused their loneliness. And yeah, at the same time, they live in with adult children. They become like they don't want to be a burden to their adult children. So this kind of thing is also caused their loneliness. Here is just some example about their feeling. For example, that my deep feeling of loneliness came from being disappointed with my daughter. This is from an older lady. She mentioned about intergenerational disagreement and argument intensified when I educated my granddaughter through my traditional approach, which were considered like outdated by my daughter and granddaughter. So she feel lonely that she was not understood by them. So another, it's a it's an older young it's an older man. He also mentioned that he felt rejected by his son-in-law because they have to live together in New Zealand, and he felt the other family members they always traveled together when they going on a holiday, but left him behind and alone at home. He mentioned that they used to include me, but now they said that the car was full, but which is not true. I frequently eat alone in my room, so I'm very lonely. Because I feel I'm not belong to this family, so which is really sad. So another example is it's from an older woman. She mentioned I feel very upset and subordinated when living together with my daughter's family in New Zealand. They also quoting a very traditional Chinese term. They refer to like it's a living on the other's fence. So for instance, she mentioned I was unwilling to get up early in the morning to cook breakfast for them. And also my friends and I usually avoided visiting each other if our adult children were at home. We feel uncomfortable, inconvenient to chat in front of them. And so this make her feel very lonely. So this is just some very typical experience of this population as they feel lonely and in New Zealand. So to address their loneliness, so this is the second phase of my PhD study. We just invite about 10 older adults. They immigrate in the later phase of life. We invite them come back to the AUT campus, provide them a very like a comfortable and reliable space, so we can chat with each other. We co-designed some community-based resources and service for them to ameliorate the loneliness of this population. So this is a kind of a circle of our co-design research. We ask them to we just show them different experience of loneliness among Chinese late life immigrants. They don't need to talk about their own experience because they don't want to disclose about their own feeling of loneliness. We just make it as a common issue. So how can we solve it together? So they co-design the resources and the surveys, and so we just collect their ideas. So then we consult two key stakeholders in New Zealand, which was also recommended by them. The Age Concern Auckland is a very, I think, a key surveys for older people in Auckland, and also Housing New Zealand because they think it's like a co-residential situation is a key issue for their loneliness. So then they want to if a housing can help them to solve some problem. So we collect the feedback from the stakeholder and also reflect to them. They kind of revised their co-design outcome. So finally, we have some kind of very good outcomes. We call them co-researchers because they involved in this whole research process, contributed their idea. We co-designed the guidebooks on accessing primary healthcare facilities and social service, aged care facilities, and public transport, which is actually is very important for them. They think it's very helpful to reduce their loneliness. And also co-housing, this kind of idea was co-designed. They think this concept is should be feasible and also useful way to exchange their social interactions and also reduce loneliness. And also they ask for if there can be more like a public social housing, and also they wanna like if because of the language difficulty, so they ask if the bus can have a next bus stop announcement to help them more become more engaging, so they can also explore outside by taking a bus. Yeah, so this is some study we done after my study, but unfortunately that was a COVID pandemic. So then we just try to use some online survey to collect some idea whether those late life immigrants, they like the companionship of a robot or pets to address their loneliness. Because of the COVID, they feel quite lonely that time. So we received the feedback from 173 people. So maybe because of the small sample size, we didn't identify significant association between the loneliness and also and the acceptance of the robot and the pets. But however, I think during the COVID, everyone knows that time the Auckland, that was the city was locked, so people cannot go outside. It's they feel lonely. The overall loneliness is high. But however, we can see the more participants, if they feel lonely, they are more likely to accept the companionship of the robots and the pet. So another study is it's also during the pandemic. So we collect more about like what kind of robot you like. We before this online survey as well. Before the survey, we also provide a short video to show them there are different types of robot. So give them some idea what are the robots like. So ask them to vote different features. So the most preferred appearance of the robot is a human-like adult. So this finding is very interesting. It's consistent with another study in Taiwan. So all the adults, they think that this kind of robot that's shown in the picture is more human-like. They think it's more reliable to provide a service for them. And the participants expressed great preference, like as a function of housework assistants, because I think they think they feel tired to work to look after the housework, and also language translation, because they're immigrants, the second language difficulty, and health monitoring, and also the robot can have some facial expression, news reading, security monitoring. And also, we found that this prevalence were found to be significantly associated with some of the demographic information, like their marital status, financial, and also duration immigration. Yeah, to summarize my presentation, we think to understanding and identifying the source of loneliness among late life immigrants are essential for guiding our healthcare professionals. And also the culture of their original country shapes their beliefs and their adaptation to host society throughout the whole process of late life immigration. Maybe some high technology can help with the loneliness, that give us like some future expectation. Yep, so that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ivy. That was also a very powerful presentation around emotional loneliness and cultural loneliness, as well as AI and technology supporting that as one possible strategy in aging populations and in migrant communities globally, particularly New Zealand, coming from China. So it was very, very special and unique. Thank you for that. We're running out of time, so I will quickly give the room to our first commentator, Francisca Besani. She is a social anthropologist from Universidad de Chile and master's in public health from the same institution, and a researcher at CESGI. Dear friend, thank you so much for being here, and the screen is all yours.
Thank you very much, Valtika, for this invitation to be part of this very special conversation that I think is both timely and very necessary. I would also like to thank the researchers for sharing their highly interesting research. Although these presentations cover different situations, they both touch on the common emotional experience of loneliness and the feeling of not belonging when you migrate. Professor Alejandra Carreño introduces us to the experiences of women crossing unauthorized borders in crisis contexts, and does so through a very important methodological decision, body mapping. By inscribing narratives onto the body, it acknowledges that the migrant experience is not merely a demographic statistic or a public policy problem. It is a lived, somatic experience lodged in a bodily memory. What I find most compelling is that loneliness does not appear as a single, simple experience. The results show three dimensions: abandonment by the state, guilt shaped by gender roles, and, remarkably, agency and personal triumph. For women who cross borders alone, loneliness is not only pain or suffering, it is also evidence of how far they have come on their own terms. Professor Ivy Sao takes us to a context that is radically different in terms of explicit violence, yet equally revealing. The loneliness of late-life Chinese immigrants in New Zealand is a quieter, less visible loneliness, precisely because it unfolds within families. One of the most delicate findings is this paradox. These older adults migrate precisely to be with their families, yet that very reunion can become a source of isolation, culturally, linguistically, and emotionally. The community design proposal is encouraging, and the openness toward technologies, such as robotics as a companionship tool, shows that the field is being creative in its responses. Both presentations leave me with three reflections. First, in both cases, the state plays a significant but deeply ambivalent role, at times absent, at times actively harmful. This reminds us that there is still much work to be done in designing public policies that genuinely accompany migrant experiences, rather than simply regulating them. Second, both work shows us that loneliness is not a single or a simple experience. It has multiple dimensions, and so do the responses to it. Even in the most difficult circumstances, people build solidarity networks and community strategies. The response to loneliness in both studies is ultimately collective. Finally, I want to highlight the methodological choices both researchers have made. Body mapping, direct testimonies, co-design. These are approaches that place people's own voices at the center. That is not only a methodological decision, it is also ethical and political. Overall, both presentations remind us that migrant loneliness is not an individual problem, but a structural one. If that is the case, the responses cannot be individual either. Community-based strategies, participatory approaches, and a genuine commitment to addressing loneliness in health policy are not optional, they are essential. I congratulate both researchers for reminding us of this with rigor and care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Francisca, for that compelling comment. Yet being succinct, it was quite strong in claiming for community involvement and for structural determination of health. Thank you so much. We will move on to our second commentator, Dr. Anjali Bhatia, who holds a PhD in public health from Auckland University of Technology. Her doctoral research explored stress and coping among youth of Indian descent in New Zealand. Dr. Bhatia now serves as a project manager at Health New Zealand Te Watu Ora, where she contributes to national programs focused on equity, public health improvement, and evidence-based decision-making. Dear Anjali, what an honor to have you with us today, and the screen is all yours.
Thank you so much, Valtika, for the invitation and the opportunity to be part of such an interesting presentation. And I just want to acknowledge both the presenters, Professor Alexandra and Professor Ivy, for such interesting studies and presentation. Thank you. Both presentations highlight migration as a profound rupture, whether it is late life migration to New Zealand or an unauthorized border crossing in Chile during COVID-19. In both the contexts, people experience loss of familiar social networks, uncertainty about belonging, and emotional strain and vulnerability. From the New Zealand presentation, we saw that the late life Chinese immigration faced dramatic changes in their lifestyle. It disrupts their daily activities and challenges their values and cultural beliefs. And similarly, the Chilean women crossing borders during the pandemic faced abrupt dislocation, fear, and isolation. Both the groups experience loneliness not just as an emotion, but as a product of structural barriers. In New Zealand, loneliness emerges from language barrier, filial expectations, cultural loneliness. And in Chile, women experience loneliness shaped by irregular status, gendered violence, and the absence of institutional protection. So, across both the settings, loneliness is not just simply being alone, it is actually the lack of safety, belonging, and recognition. Both the groups draw on their sense of self to cope. The Chinese older adults rely on cultural identity, transnational ties, and community norms, and the Chilean women rely on personal resilience, motherhood identities, and solidarity with other women and transit. The key differences between both the context was the New Zealand migrants arrived through family reunion schemes to join their adult children, whereas the Chilean women cross borders irregularly and under crisis situation. And New Zealand, where it offered more kind of structured systems in terms of primary care, aged care, community services, whereas the Chilean women often had to navigate informal or absent support systems, especially during the COVID-19 border closures. Both the contexts show that the intervention must be co-designed with migrants and experience their agency. The New Zealand presentation demonstrated how the co-designed guidebooks and co-housing concepts directly addresses loneliness, and Chile could benefit from similar participatory approaches, but adapted to the realities of the irregular migration and gendered risk. Loneliness cannot be solved by individual coping strategies alone. We need safer migration pathways, culturally safe services, language support, and gender responsive protection systems. So, in the end, I just want to say that loneliness among migrants is shaped by disrupted identity, structural barriers, and the search for being belongs to some place. But migrants themselves hold powerful cultural and personal resources for coping. Thank you.
Thanks so very much, Anjali, for that comment as well, connecting both presentations around commonalities of what loneliness might feel, might come from, and the need for multi-level layered interventions that recognize the complexity of this topic, which seems to be quite urgent as a mega trend today, not just in migrant communities, but also among many different communities globally. Thank you so very much. I will now allow the last few minutes we have of this webinar for all the panelists to open up your videos as I ask you a 1-minute response question very quickly. The question is, what specific evidence-informed interventions that could be within healthcare systems, community settings, public policies, international, elsewhere, could be implemented to mitigate experiences of loneliness among migrant populations within our national and regional contexts. So we'll begin in the same order of presentation. Alejandra, would you like to say what you think the one most important thing we could do to tackle loneliness among migrant communities right now?
Thank you, Baltica. It's very difficult to identify just in 1 minute, just one thing. In fact, I think that at least in Chile, we are continuing to abord the mental health from an individual perspective. I mean, mental health teams have not the abilities or the capacities to abord the intercultural to give an intercultural approach to their attentions, but at the same time, as we can see in both presentations, the communities enhance capacities. They they cope with the strategies to face loneliness, and in our case, I think that we need to enhance these capacities that are present in these communities, and to understand how in a collective places, the places that they use. For example, the use of the art, the sport, music, the dance, all these places that are just considered as cultural contributions of these communities are used also for themselves to create a different narrative of their migration. I was very surprised in my researches with when they talk about for example about how important for them is to take a walk in the city, to have a very safe place in the park, to can continue with to doing connections between the things that they know, the new things that they know in this place, with experience that can bring them the sense of home. And all these things appears in their quotidianity, and we are not connecting that with mental health. And I think that it's promoted. And we used to just reduce the mental health to the diagnosis and the pathology, and giving the same approach that is more individualistic than this all these other organization of strategies to cope with these sensations. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. Ivy, what's your take on this?
Thank you very much. I think the most important is to help them to rebuild their network. And also we can see in New Zealand, there are many different community groups. So for those people, they have a place, they have their shared culture, language, and also their similar background experience. So they can like a regular gaze with to meet each other, to share. And also, I think for those older people, they still want to be part of the community. They want still to contribute. So being a member of the group, they can do like some volunteer. And also the group leader will help them when they have any need to help them to have a say, to let the government people know about their need. So I think that's a really important way to help them, to support them to reduce their loneliness. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. A very good compliment to Alejandra's comment. Francisca?
I was going to say the same that Professor Ivy. I think that it's very important, the shared identity community groups. And also because I think these are spaces that can help to build resilience and agency. So I think it's a very important step.
Thank you, Fran. Finally, Anjali, please.
Thank you. Just to add on to what Professor Ivy said, I think the culturally and linguistically tailored support services might be really useful in the context, especially providing bilingual navigators to support access to health, social services, and aged care, and to kind of co-design and tailor mental health and well-being resources and services would be helpful.
Thank you so very much. I want to thank you one last time for being with us today, for sharing your experience and knowledge with us, but also to the world through UDD TV channel and YouTube live stream. It's going to be there to share around with your colleagues, students. It could become teaching material as well. And of course, I invite everyone connected right now to the coming webinar, webinar number 5, which is going to be around maternal care and gender issues in healthcare among young migrant populations in New Zealand and Chile, evidence-based lessons and challenges. And this will be happening, depending on the country, on Tuesday, 14th of April. or Wednesday, 15th of April. Thank you so very much. Again, it's a pleasure hosting these webinars where exchange enriches, deepens, widens, and increase our research and impact as well. Thank you so very much. And until the next